Alright guys, if you clicked on this video, more than likely you're having a check engine light and you have some codes. You have a P0021 or a P0011. Now these two specific codes are related to timing, and it's telling you that the timing is advanced. Now you have a bank 1 and you have a bank 2. A P0021 would be bank 2. A P0011 will be bank 1. Everything I'm going to be demonstrating is for the 370Z or the G37, but you can use it for your Honda, your Kia, your Ford. It doesn't really matter. As long as you have this code and you have a variable valve timing, you will go through this process very similarly. The parts might look a little bit different, but you would do it the same way. Now, before we get started, let me remind everyone that's watching, I am a trained professional. I have been doing this for many years. I am actually a certified master ASC tech, and I know what I'm doing. So if you don't feel comfortable working on your vehicle, don't work on it. This video is just to help aid anyone that's having a P0021 or P0011. That is simply it. I am not telling you what's wrong with your car, and I'm not telling you exactly how to fix it. It is up to you to diagnose and figure out what's going on, or take it to a professional. So let's go ahead and get started. So you're here, you have a P0021 or P0011. Now, let me emphasize this part. The most critical part of this whole diagnostics of this system, everything works with oil. Everything works with oil pressure. If you're having any of these codes, if you're having both of the codes at the same time, specifically both of these codes at the same time, check your oil pressure, okay? So it will give you this code if you have low oil or your oil is contaminated. When was the last time you changed your oil? If it's been a while, and guess what? It's time to change your oil. You should be doing this every 5,000 miles. I don't wait 5,000 miles in my vehicles. I drive them hard, so I do it every 3,000 miles or so. So change your oil. Oil is cheap and engine is not. So here are the other possible scenarios that you could have. You could have a bad connection to the solenoid. Now, I'll remind you guys again, this is for the 370Z or the G37. So this solenoid that I'm holding in my hand is specifically to this specific vehicle, but it will look something similar in whatever make or model you're working on. Check the connection. You got to make sure that the pigtail, the connector is not broken. Make sure it's not loose. Do a visual inspection. Inspect the wires. Make sure that there's nothing broken. The wire isn't frayed. There isn't oil coming covered all over the connector. Inspect it, okay? If everything else looks good, then let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. So the next thing would more than likely be is you could have a bad cam sensor. So the cam sensor in this specific model, the 370Z or the G37, is right here, right above this cover, okay? There's a sprocket that spins inside here, and this picks up the signal to the cam. So you could have, this could be wrong. Now, in this specific sensor with this specific model, it is a 3-wire sensor, okay? And some sensors are easier to test than others. With this specific sensor, you would need to add power and ground and measure the signal. So you could do it with a multimeter, but you would need some type of an oscilloscope so you could see the signal coming through. So it would be a little bit more difficult you testing it at home with just basic tools, but you can get it done if you want to. Now, usually these are very low voltage. What I mean by that is it's probably 5 or 6 volts of electricity. If you're putting 12 volts to one of these sensors, you're gonna fry it. So be aware of what you're doing. Don't start probing things unless you know what's going on. So look up the schematic to your vehicle and see how the part functions and then test it. But I always recommend testing everything because as you're gonna see, we're gonna keep going down the list. It could be multiple things could be causing this code. You can have low oil, you could have dirty oil, you could have one of these solenoids could be bad, you could have one of these sensors bad, you could have even the pigtail to the sensor bad. You could even have a timing chain or a timing belt problem where there is something loose, the tensioner is loose, the timing chain has become loosened or has worn out, or it could have jump timing. So there are so many different scenarios that could give you this specific code that it's really up to you or the professional that's working on this car to really pinpoint and diagnose everything. Now, we're going to go ahead and jump to what I discovered in the vehicle and how I tested it and how I fixed it. So let's go ahead and go with that. Okay, so in front of me, I have a timing chain cover for a 370Z or a G37, and right in front of us, right here, you can see this is one of the solenoids that could go bad. So we have bank 1 and we have bank 2 right in front of us. So right here in this upper left corner, I have a cam sensor, and this is the cover for this side. So I have this left over from one of the builds that we put together in the channel, and this was a bad engine with a rod knock, but some of these parts are good and I'm keeping them around just in case we need them or for demonstration purposes, just like this. So let's go ahead and jump into this scenario. So you have a code. I'm going to go specifically to the code that I had for this vehicle and how I repaired it. So you have a P0021. Okay, so you're going to have bank 2. Okay, you have the specific code for bank 2. So what I discovered in mine, I did all those scenarios that I told you guys. I checked the connector, I checked everything, I checked the oil, I made sure everything was good. So then I went and started moving towards the actual components. So the first thing I did, since I had one of these cam sensors lying around, I went ahead and swapped it, and I swapped out this cam sensor, okay? And that's why I marked it here. I marked it showing that it could possibly be bad. So I replaced it, I marked it, and the code continued to be there. So I moved on to the next. I know that some of you guys are not gonna have a cam sensor available to you, but the easiest way in how I could diagnose this vehicle, the quickest, the most efficient, was simply replacing the sensor. It's simply just one bolt, okay? And I was trying to see if the symptom went away, okay? I still had the same code. So I went ahead and I moved on to the solenoid itself. And when I removed the cover off of here, because on the 370Z or the G37, it is difficult to remove this solenoid. There's a hose here and there's things in the way and you simply can't do it. You gotta remove the whole cover. So I removed the whole cover and I checked the timing chain. I make sure I inspected it, I made sure everything was good, and it looked like it was in good order. So inside here, okay, you can see they have some type of washers or spacers. These seal, okay, the sprocket. There's a sprocket that goes in here and it seals everything. If you discover that one of these are broken, then you have found your problem. More than likely, there's oil leaking past one of these rings, okay? And that is your problem. Low oil pressure will cause this code. So keep that in mind, but it was in good shape, so I moved on. So I removed this solenoid and I conducted a test, and I'm gonna show you exactly what test that was. So for this test, I grabbed my multimeter. Now, you don't need this specific multimeter. You just need a multimeter that's able to measure resistance, measure ohms specifically. So I'm gonna go ahead and change it to ohms. And what I'm gonna do is, you can see it's open right now, and I'm gonna touch both leads together, and we're gonna zero everything in. We're making sure that these leads are in good shape, okay? There's a connection between this wire to this wire, okay? So I have the multimeter ready to go, and now what I am gonna do is, inside here, with these two alligator clips, I'm gonna clip one side, and connect it, and I'm going to clip the other side and connect it. Now, inside here, inside the solenoid, there is a coil. That coil wraps around here and it becomes an electromagnet. That electromagnet lets the oil pressure from the engine flow through here and pressurize your sprocket, your cam facer, okay? So, if this coil is bad, it could be causing the problem. So, what we're gonna do right now is test the coil. So, I have it wired. I'm gonna grab one end. It does not matter which end you do this on. And I'm gonna grab the other end. So now I am testing the windings. So here you can see we have 7.6, 7.7 ohms. So this coil to me seems to be just fine. If this coil was to be bad, this is something you would see. You would connect everything and you would see, I'm going to disconnect it, you would see nothing. Okay, that's one possible scenario. Or you would see a lower reading. You would see something like this. Now I'm touching both of the wires together in here. You would see something like that, a 0. Okay, what that means is the coil has been shorted out or it's open. When it's open, you would see nothing. Okay, when it has been shorted out, you would see a very low reading where it'll be 0, something like that. Okay, that would indicate that this coil has been shorted out. Now, that is not the situation with this. I'm going to show you exactly what happened with this. It turns out that this solenoid, this specific solenoid, is jammed. And I discovered that the other one that I had is jammed as well. So apparently these things are notorious for jamming up, and I'm going to show you how to test it to see if it's jammed up, if it's working or not. So this is what we're going to use. We're going to use a power probe, and what this device is used for is to measure if there's power and ground, or to simply add power, or to add ground. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the sound. My battery is fully charged. It's got 3.8 volts. So there's plenty of juice coming to this. Now, what I'm going to demonstrate here is specifically, this is specifically for the 370Z or the G37. Your solenoid might work very similar, might work exactly the same. So I don't want to see you guys writing in the comments, hey, I did this to a Chevy Impala and I burned up my solenoid. Well, I never showed you a demonstration on Chevy Impala, so I don't want to hear it. So I'm going to plug this wire here. This is going to be the ground, and this is going to be the positive. And what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to energize this solenoid. And this solenoid should move back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Oh, it moved for a second, and now it's jammed again. I don't know if you guys captured it on camera, but it is jammed again. I could push it back in, and now it's jammed. And I'm going to push it. Now, this solenoid should be moving freely back and forth, forward and backwards, okay? There's a spring mechanism in here, and when you energize it, that it moves one way. There, it actually worked. It's actually working now. So this solenoid, this very pesky solenoid, gets jammed, okay? And you can see it's working here. That's what was causing my problem. So I swapped it out with a good used one, but before I did that, I tested it. So this is another one that was jammed. Let's go ahead and hook it up. Well, this one doesn't move at all. So this one is really stuck. So I actually wanted to conduct an experiment, and I wanted to see if we could unseize it with something like this, okay? This is parts cleaner. This is designed to clean parts, yada, yada, yada. So I'm gonna spray a little bit of this stuff on and see if we could unjam this one specifically, because this one isn't working at all. All right, now we're going to test it out and see if it works. And we still have nothing. So this one is still completely seized. The coil is good. We're going to test the coil to demonstrate. So this coil is good, but the mechanism is jammed. So that's exactly what happened with the engine. That's why I was getting a P0021. The coil was good, but this mechanism was jammed. So if you conduct one of these tests and it turns out that the coil is good, make sure after you have tested the coil that you have discovered that is good, make sure you energize it and you exercise it to see if the solenoid is working, if the mechanism is working. Because in this situation, this one's not working and this one is. You can see the difference, okay? This is what you want. Now, both of these ohmed out the same. Both of these coils are good, but this one is jammed and this one isn't. So that's how I discovered what was giving me the code. I simply replaced one of these out. I installed it, I cleared the code, and everything worked again. I have decided to pour a little bit of transmission fluid into this container. And I'm going to stick the solenoid in here, and what I'm going to try to do is, since the transmission fluid has detergents in it that will clean any type of gunk, I'm hoping we could unseize this, we could get this to be usable again. And what can we achieve with this? Well, in case you're stranded somewhere and you have this P0021 or 11 and you discover that the solenoid is bad and you cannot get a new part anytime soon, perhaps maybe you could ungunk it and you could get it to work again so you could limp home. So we're going to just let it sit in here, soak in there for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and test it later. Okay guys, so this is what we have discovered. Even though I let this solenoid sit in there in the transmission fluid to try to soak everything and break anything loose, any type of gunk, it still doesn't work properly. I tried even using this pick, moving it back and forth, and I was able to get some movement, trying to free it loose, and it still doesn't work. So let's do it one more time so you guys can see. We have a circuit, it's showing it's illuminated, and it doesn't work. But I did discover in this one, okay, this is a good used one, I did discover after soaking it for just a couple of seconds with some transmission fluid, I discovered that with a decent one, I was able to make it work even better. So now that it has a little bit of lubrication, you can really see it move, and it works very well. So a little bit of transmission fluid has unjammed this one quite a bit. So if it was stuck before, it's definitely not stuck anymore. And I could just dip it inside here and activate it. You can see the solenoid is working. You can see the movement. So we're going to store this with a little baggie. I'm going to dip this back into some oil. I'm going to put some motor oil on it, and I'm going to store it with a little bit of lubrication. So the next time I need one of these, I have it ready. All right, everything is nice and lubed up. And the next time I need one of these, I know this one's going to be good. Well guys, in case you were wondering, why the heck do we have a variable valve timing? Let me explain. Variable valve timing, it is a very simple concept, but yet complicated process. What the manufacturers have done is they have combined the ability to advance the timing and retard it to either improve performance or improve fuel efficient. So by being able to retard the timing and advance the timing, you're able to do that. In the older vehicles, you would have a set time on your sprockets and they would not be able to advance or retard unless you do it manually. A lot of the tuners, they went into aftermarket sprockets and they started to retard the timing or advance the timing depending on what would be best for the performance. Now, when you do that, you run into drivability problems where the car will not idle properly. With variable valve timing, you get the best of both worlds. You get fuel efficient and you get the performance when the computer believes it's ready for it. So yes, it's a pain in the ass to figure out and it's a pain in the ass to deal with, but you just got to get used to it. This is the modern age. This is what we have to deal with. And if you got any value from this video, make sure to subscribe and give me a like.